Ah, okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Ladies and gents, we are live now on YouTube. So thank you, Rebbitzin, for standing in during the Rabbi's conference. I got more time for you to have with Rebbitzin. In 2 weeks, I'll be off to the Holy Land. So you'll take over for 10 days then as well. Okay, great. We're live now, so let's do the shiur. I want to start off with just a summary on this week's parsha overview, and then we will get into some details relevant to the parsha and, of course, to the time period that we are getting ready to receive the Torah once again at Mount Sinai. And I'm going to focus on a theme that we discussed a little bit during this period, as you can see here: equality versus individuality. And this is a theme that's related to this period of counting the Omer, and in order to be ready to receive the Torah on Shavuos. So I think it's an important theme of discussion. Also, some people have been talking to me about, we preach about love and connection, but oftentimes we have a hard time getting along with each other. So I think it's still an important topic to address until we can rectify, until we can fix that up. So looking at the parsha we have here, we're in the Sinai desert, and God says to conduct a census of the 12 tribes of Israel. Hence, the Hebrew name for the book is Bamidbar, but actually our sages call it Sefer Pekudim, the book of Numbers, because here we have this counting, the census taking place. And Moshe counts the Jewish people, and there are 603,550, you can see it on the screen, men who are of draftable age. What was draftable age back then? Anyone know? 20 to 60 had to serve in the military. The tribe of Levi, how many were they? You have it on the screen. They numbered 22,300 males, but their count was from age 1 month because they did not serve in the military, so they were counted separately, and their count was a different reckoning based on their service. And from this, our sages tell us, we see that from 30 days, which is considered the time that a child is considered viable, that they're a living being, that they have a much better chance at survival once they've been able to live 30 days here. And that shows us the importance. You're never too young, you're never too old. Anyways, we describe here how the Leviim are to serve in the sanctuary. We're going to read about that in the Parsha. They replaced the firstborn, whose number they approximated, and they were the firstborns were disqualified when they participated in the worshiping of the golden calf. Even though they were the ones who were supposed to serve in the temple, they lost that privilege. You had 273 firstborn who lacked a Levite to replace them. And so what did they do? They had to pay a 5 shekel ransom to redeem themselves. And by the way, that 5 shekel ransom is done to this day, where all firstborns have to be redeemed in a procedure called Pidyon Haben. Redemption of the firstborn, exactly. So when the people broke camp, the 3 Levite clans, who were they? If you look at the Parsha, you'll see there were 3 Levite clans: Gershon, Kahas, and Merari. So they each had their jobs, their particular tasks of what they had to do, and they dismantled and transported the sanctuary, the Mishkan, whenever they traveled. When did they travel? It's interesting, the Torah describes it as 42 journeys, not 42 stops. You would think if the Jews are here in the desert for 40 years, you would say maybe they stopped 42 times along their journey. But our sages call it, not our sages, the Torah itself calls it 42 journeys. And maybe it's about constantly being on a journey in life. Yes, it's true that sometimes we pause, we stop, we take a break. That's all true. But the focus should be on the journey. And where are we going? I was driving to Rustenburg with a few illustrious rabbis in my car, and we were talking about the GPS wasn't working well. I couldn't get it on, whatever it was. So it reminded me of the story of Einstein when he was in the car, when he was on the train, and the conductor's coming around collecting the tickets. So when they get to Einstein, he asks him, "Where's your ticket?" And Einstein, he's searching for that ticket. He's looking in his pocket and in his pants and his socks and his jacket and his bag, and he can't find it. And the conductor says, "You know what, Professor Einstein, I know exactly who you are. It's okay." But Einstein doesn't relent, and he's still searching and looking. And the professor says, the conductor says, "I told you, I know who you are. It's all right." And Einstein looks at him and says, "I also know who I am. I need to know where I'm going." So, my friends, they're told it's in the Torah. The Torah is describing where they're going, where we're heading. Of course, we're heading to the Promised Land, but along the way there were various journeys and encampments, and each time they stopped, they needed the Levites were the ones who were transporting the Mishkan, the sanctuary, and so they would dismantle it and reassemble it as they reached each encampment and as they continued on each journey. Then we describe how they erected their own tents around it. And this, we're going to have an image just now. I made a mess here. I had AI make this for me, but again, it made a mess. And I asked it to fix it up, and it obviously didn't fix it up. You're going to have to excuse me with this, but my apologies. Hopefully it's acceptable to you. I mean, there is some nice graphics in here, and I did put a lot of work. AI can't do it for you. It could do nicer graphics than I could, as it made this beautiful image for us. But anyways, maybe you could see here a little bit how they encamped. The Mishkan, which looks nothing like this AI image, was in the middle, and each of the tribes encamped around it. So you had the Kohanim, they carried the sanctuary's vessels, the ark and the menorah and everything, and each tribe would camp around them. So you had the camps. I'm not going to go into the details now, but if you read it in the Parsha, you'll see where each tribe encamped. Maybe we'll look at it a little bit in the Parsha just now when we get into the actual text, which I did put some text here for you. And you'll see how each tribe, there was the tribe of Yehuda that had eligible military conscripted men there were 74,600. The tribe of Yisachar, 54,400. Zevulun, 57,400. To the south, we had Reuven with 46,500 men. Shimon with 59,300. The tribe of Gad with 46,650 men, ages 20 to 60. Then to the west, we had the tribe of Ephraim with 40,500 men. Manasseh, 32,200. I think they were the smallest tribe. Then you had Benjamin, their tribe at 35,400. And to the north, you had the tribe of Dan with 62,700, Asher 41,500, and Naphtali with 53,400 men. And so this formation was kept while they traveled, and each tribe had its own leader, its own Nasi, prince, and their flag, which with their color and their identity. While AI put it together for me, it's not reliable, so we're not going to rely on it, meaning AI just created it on their own, but it's not based on the Torah. What I want to do is I want to start with a discussion related to the Parsha and related to life in general. And the question that you can see on the screen is, what's the fine line that reconciles the conflicting notions of equality and individuality? So we know that in life in general, we like to celebrate each other, and we have to know every person is indispensable to God's plan. But at the same time, we're part of a greater whole. We discussed previously that now during this period of the Omer, we count the weeks, but we also count the days. The weeks symbolize the community, the equality, but the days represents the individuality. But let's take this a step further. The French Revolution was one of the most important moments in modern history. Ironically, in my drive with Rabbi Weinberg from Joburg to Rustenburg for this conference, we talked about it. So that's why I'm mentioning it now. And more than just an isolated spat of tension between the serfs of France and the upper crust, and I can't profess to know the whole historical context and everything else, but the French Revolution was really also a set of ideas. It was a certain spirit of liberty and equality that until then the world had not seen. There was this aspect that all of a sudden we're going to bring liberty and equality to all. And there are certainly many gruesome elements to that fateful uprising. It wasn't the prettiest. But the underlying spirit of the revolution, I think, was indeed noble. There was something very valuable about that. Because there was this aspect, for almost all of human history, where people had set up societies in which the ruling class always eventually gained power. And they would wield it relatively mercilessly on the ordinary people. Even in England, what year was the Magna Carta written? Anyone know? Whoa, you're good. Were you around then, Clive? I'm just joking. So Clive remembers it well. Canaan Hara. 1066, he said. But let me ask you, did it change much? Was there equality? The Magna Carta was written to say that, we grant you powers. I mean, if we grant you powers, what does that say? We hold the power, and we grant you certain powers. And it certainly didn't help the Jews. The Jews were expelled from England not long after that anyways. So what does it tell us? Whether it was kings or religious authorities or affluent people, wealthy landowners, the ordinary person always suffered almost every type of civilization throughout history. And that's what the peasants in France had to say no more. The battle cry was liberty, equality, and fraternity. And the common man and woman now joined arms to fight for equality and for the establishment of a true democracy. And while democracy is far from perfect, it's probably the most perfect of the types of ruling that you could have. I mean, in the past century, we've seen socialism and communism and capitalism has its benefits. Democracy certainly is the most ideal, not saying it's perfect. It has lots of flaws in it. Probably the most perfect is the Torah's methodology, but nobody wants, what would you call a religious ethnocracy? There's a name for it. Theocracy. Nobody wants to live in theocracy, right? So certainly it was important to have this French Revolution because we're still talking about those ideas to this day. The ideas of living in a society where people have more freedom, where people indeed are granted, to whatever degree, more freedom and more human rights. In fact, today, while it's true that if you have certain privileges, if you grow up with certain advantages, if you're born into certain families, you could probably have a better chance at becoming wealthy and having better health care. But there's nothing that bars anybody from succeeding today. I follow certain influencers who talk about their lives and describe how they came from nothing, from rags to riches. And there are so many such stories. There are plenty of people who become millionaires and billionaires. Although at the end of the day, how much money do you need to be happy? Why is it? It's an interesting phenomenon that in life, there's this insatiable desire for money. If I gave you, let's say, food, what do you like? Give me some ideas. What do you like? You like steaks? You like lamb chops? No, you're vegetarian? Okay, you like sushi? Also not. Okay, you like cake? Whatever it might be that you like. I give you the food and you're happy, you enjoy it. But after you're satiated, you bless, you thank God, you thank the person, genug shine, right? It's enough. But what happens with money? Money, 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 money. Right? What happens with money? There's this insatiable desire for more and more and more. And this is across all of society. In Judaism, it's acknowledged and recognized as well. The Mishnah says, Mishi Yeshlamana, a person has 100, writes a Messiah, wants 200. And a person has 200, wants 400. We have 1 million, you want 10 million. You have 10 million, you want 1 billion. It keeps growing. Our desire is insatiable for it. And what is it about it? The truth is, we all recognize that there's a potential with money. And as long as that potential is a positive and proper potential, there's so much good that we could achieve and accomplish with that money. And in a democratic society, there has to be that equality that every person should be able to have that same access to be able to make the money or do what they want or not do. I think in Judaism, while we recognize and acknowledge there's so much good you could do with money, but we realize that while you could use money to buy a house, it won't buy you a home. And while you could use your money to buy food, it won't buy your appetite. And while you could use money to buy medicine, it's not going to buy your health, right? And while you can have money to buy a bed, it's not going to buy you rest. And while you have money that could buy you information, it's not going to buy you wisdom. And you could keep going. You could have money to pay for servants, but it's not going to buy you loyalty. And you could pay money for associates. It's even in the Mishnah to buy friendship, but it's not going to buy true friends. And you can have money to buy compliments and flattery. It's not going to buy the true respect. And money could buy us thrills, but it's not going to buy us true joy. So we realize, and in fact, the Parsha itself talks about money and healthy relationship that we should have with money. And Hashem says, Kili kol haaretz, the entire land, the entire world is mine. But remember, Atem gorim v'teshavim. You are still only sojourners. You are occupants. There's no ownership. There's guardianship. We're custodians. God gives us the money, or God gives us talents, and God gives us the blessings we have. And the question is, what do we do with it? If we recognize that everything ultimately belongs to Hashem, then as we go through the Parsha and learn the lessons and the ideas and the themes, then we realize actually there's tremendous lessons we could learn. And that's why the discussion that we're picking from today's Parsha in preparation for Shavuos is about equality versus individuality. And while we discussed it before, I think I need a little bit more, so I'm talking to myself, because I never talk to anybody here. I talk to me. In fact, if you look at my computer screen, there's a video here, and I could see all the online participants whose videos are on, and I could also see myself. So I'm talking to me, because right now I'm the only one here I see whose video is actually on. You see me too, so if the hat fits, you can wear it. But the point is, the Torah discusses many ideas. We read on Shabbos about forgiving debts. It's like bankruptcy laws, and you have that loans not to lend somebody on interest, and the release of servants, and all these different ideas. So when we think about money and our love and our desire for money, we have to realize, if I'm utilizing my money in a proper way, then of course that represents the potential of everything I could do with my money. And there's so much good we all could do. If I'm utilizing it not the proper way, and therefore we should be grateful for the blessings we have, instead of being jealous and envious of other people. You want to be jealous of Warren Buffett? He's got all this money. He's one of the world's richest people. But he's got his own problems and shtick. And at the end of the day, I think we all prefer to be in our own skin with our own baggage than having someone else's baggage. Because God gave us the ability to handle our own. But we still have to understand the difference between equality and individuality. Because in other societies, they say everybody should be equal. And in fact, we read it in Pirkei Avot last week in chapter 4, chapter 5. I'm already forgetting which chapter we did. Must have been chapter 5, because this is the last week before Shavuos, right? So they were talked about the foolishness when people think that everybody should be equal. No, God created a world with wealth and poverty, because God wants there to be benefactors and beneficiaries. And there are people there are teachers and there are students. There are givers and there are receivers. And that's just the way. There are consumers and contributors. This is the way God made the world. So we have to have a better understanding then about this concept of equality, and to understand what the French, today's share is not about the French Revolution. I don't intend to go into the history of it because I don't know that much of it. It just happened to be in the car before talking with Rabbi Weinberg. He made mention of it. And another irony he mentioned was that the Chabad Rebbes chose the song of the losing army. While the Alter Rebbe was opposed to Napoleon, his song, Napoleon's victory song, became the Chabad victory march at the end of Yom Kippur. Napoleon's march. But nevertheless, Napoleon was not completely victorious. Far from it. But I think the ideals that Napoleon tried to espouse, those endured. And the irony was actually that the Chabad teachings, the Alter Rebbe in particular, opposed Napoleon's methodology. Maybe not his methodology. He opposed his what's the correct word here? But his theory. On the one hand, Napoleon was offering freedom and equality and liberty and all those benefits, the Alter Rebbe said that would be good for Jews physically, but not spiritually. So I don't think we were opposed to having freedom. And today we need it because we see the alternative. But these are all interesting observations. But either way, the whole concept of the French Revolution was seeking equality and liberty and to purge the corruption and the tyranny and the other theocracies and the other seas that at the time were not very healthy and good for a productive, proper society. And hopefully, with democracy comes people are able to have a more happy and peaceful and productive life. So the idea of today's discussion is to talk about the notion of equality. And like I said, equality has been espoused for a long time. While the Magna Carta was written, as Clive told us, in 1066, which is nearly a millennia ago, it took a very long time for it to be properly implemented. While Abraham Lincoln was freeing slaves, what year was Abraham Lincoln? I'm the American, I should know some of my history. 18 something, but it still took I think it took a century from Abraham Lincoln's proclamation, declaration of freedom until proper freedom was actually granted to all in the United States. And it's still lagging behind. And there's still apartheid in South Africa, and there's still apartheid in America, and there's still apartheid everywhere in the world. We have to acknowledge and recognize it. One rabbi in the conference told me there's even apartheid amongst rabbis. Oh, I wasn't supposed to repeat that. And okay, we don't mean it in the sense of, the cruel discrimination. Obviously, this country has democracy and freedom, and it's a rainbow nation today, but it's far behind what it has to be. So today, what I want to address and talk about in this concept is let's explore a few important areas regarding this. Do you believe in the notion of granting everyone equal opportunity? Let me ask you, as a parent, as a grandparent, as a teacher, as a team captain, as an employer, as whatever position we all have leadership positions in life in our sphere of influence. Do you believe that everyone, all children, all students, all employees, all teammates are to be given the same opportunities? Or do we draw the line? Are some more qualified than others? Is it possible that some could be more qualified than others? Absolutely, right? So that really brings us to the heart of this discussion. Are we all created equal? Where was it the Animal Farm that said everyone's created equal, just some are more equal than others? So if we think about this and we think about history, whether in this country or other places in the world, we realize that the Constitution talks about the bedrock of the Rainbow Nation, that everybody's created equal. And that's very, very important. As an American, I look at the Declaration of Independence written almost 250 years ago. On July 4th will be the 250th anniversary of the US Declaration of Independence. And what do we read? How we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the importance of that cannot be overstressed, right? These are important values that oftentimes get damaged, that oftentimes get neglected and abandoned, and sadly we all know across the globe. There is freedom in South Africa, but is there equality? Far from it. And you could blame it on the history. You could blame it on opportunity. You could blame it on crime and corruption. I'm not going to discuss what to blame it on because everybody will tell you something else. But I do think it's a basic important tenet and truth of life, even in Torah. And therefore, it's important for us to have this discussion because the Torah recognizes both. That while there has to be equality, at the same time, there's individuality. And this is something we could talk about many times, as we did talk about it in the context of the counting of the Omer. If you didn't count the Omer last night, we counted 41. But let's look around this room at each of us. I look around, everybody looks very different from each other. No one person looks the same. We come in different skin colors and tones and hairs, right? And if we were created equal, then, maybe we should all look the same, but we don't. So while we should all have equal opportunity, The question is, what does every person do with their opportunity? How many of us squander our opportunities away? I'm not going to talk about my own problem, my own stories. Each of us could look in the mirror and look at our own situations. Did we miss opportunities? Some people never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. And we have to consider. So we have to look at what's the fine line that reconciles the conflicting or seemingly conflicting notions of equality versus individuality. And it's an important aspect. And so we're going to look at it from the Parsha. And first, I want to look at how absolutely there has to be equality. Everybody is created equal in God's eyes. We're all created in the divine image. And therefore, we have to see that no one person has blood redder than another, regardless of our race, color, creed. But at the same time, the very same Torah does talk about the wood carrier and the wood chopper and the leaders and the followers. And if you look at our Parsha, Parshas Bamidbar, which is always read in proximity to the holiday of Shavuos, always the Shabbos before. So what does Bamidbar mean? In the desert, very good. Bamidbar means in the desert. And the desert theme is very much connected with the events that surround Matan Torah, God's giving us the Torah at Mount Sinai. And indeed, when the Torah tells us the story of Matan Torah, let's see how it begins right here. Let's look at it in the Torah, and let's read the verses, and let's discuss it. So yeah, the Hebrew and English, as always, my earlier slides are a little bit better than the later slides. They always, they got prepared later. But let's read it inside. Can you see it? Torah says, in the 3rd month of the children of Israel's departure from Egypt, on this day they arrived in the desert of Sinai. And the Torah describes they journeyed from Rephidim, they arrived in the desert of Sinai, they encamped in the desert, and very powerful words, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar. And Israel encamped there opposite the mountain. So as it turns out, my friends, Matan Torah was the very first event the Jews experienced as they ventured into the desert from Egypt. Now, of course, there were many events they experienced until then. These are 49 days from the Exodus until receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai, that many events occurred. But this is the crescendo. This is the ultimate, the ultimate purpose, a detail that the Torah feels very important to point out to us, and halacha mandates that we read this every year. In fact, you see it right here, that every year we read this. The Shulchan Aruch says that the way the schedule is set up, that the Torah portion of Bamidbar is always going to be read before the holiday of Shavuos. So maybe some years Bahalos could also be, but Bamidbar always has to be the week before Shavuos. So now that we know that the pattern, the Parsha and Matan Torah are so intrinsically connected, let's take a closer look at what happened on the first day in the desert at the foot of Mount Sinai. What does the Torah say? And quite undramatically, the Torah tells us that they encamped at the foot of the mountain. And here is a very interesting thing. If you look at the words, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, the verse says Israel encamped there. What's wrong, seemingly, linguistically, or grammatically with this verse? What would you say? If you speak Hebrew, you know the verse says Vayichan. Vayichan is in the singular form. Do you see that? And Israel encamped there as if it's one individual. Doesn't that seem wrong? We're talking here, we read the census. How many Jews were there? Approximately 3 million, right? We read the census before, it was 603,550. It's a lot of people. So how could you say Israel encamped there? So here Rashi comes to the rescue and says, Ki ish echad b'lev echad, quoting our sages, that they were as one person with one heart, but all the other encampments were, unfortunately, there was complaints and strife. So Rashi's quoting our sages in the Medrash that sees this as the Torah's way of telling us that the Jews had a unique aspect of togetherness that was so intense. It was as if they were like one person with one heart as they encamped at Mount Sinai. And there's a very important message there. That national unity was a prerequisite to receiving the Torah. And while the Medrash tells us that all the other encampments, there was politics and people didn't get along with each other, strife and complaints, and some things never change. Well, at Sinai it was no different. At Sinai it was very different. We started there. We were good. We were behaved. We got along. There at the mountain, the Jews melded into one unified entity, and only then did God seem it. God said, "Okay, it's important. This one I'm going to give you the gift because you're all united as one." Let's read it in the text here. It didn't all fit in, but this text you're probably all familiar with because we say this in the Amidah in our Siddur every day. You know the song? It's a prayer. Sim shalom tova uveracha chaim chen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu al kol Yisrael amecha. What does this prayer mean? We say it every day, 3 times a day. We ask Hashem to please bestow peace, goodness, and blessing, life, graciousness, kindness, mercy upon us, upon all the people of Israel. And what do we say? Barucheinu Avinu kulanu ki echad b'or panecha. Bless us, our Father, all of us as one, right? B'or panecha, with the light of your countenance. So here you go. And we continue. For by the light of your countenance, you gave us, Hashem, our God, the Torah of life and loving kindness and righteousness, blessing, mercy, life, and peace. V'tov b'yeinecha levarech esamcha Yisrael b'chol eis uv'chol shah b'shivah emecha. And we conclude the blessing saying, may it be favorable in your eyes to bless your people Israel at all times and at every moment with your peace. How do you like that? Sorry that I put those words, emphasis added there, but I think those are emphasized words. Particularly, what are we saying? We want the blessing of Torah. And when do we get that? It's only bestowed on us when we are kulanu ki echad. And we say that Hashem, Barcheinu Avinu kulanu ki echad, bless us, our Father, all of us as one. Look at Israeli society, look at any community, look at any family, and there's always, unfortunately, different feelings and expressions and people not always getting along with each other. It's a serious issue, and it's something that's not new. And therefore, the power of this blessing to say that we want peace. And in fact, look at this Mishnah here. I don't know what happened with these slides. To check when you give a Canva to help you design your slides. I didn't realize they're going to get cut off. Okay, I hope our online participants could see them better. I don't know, maybe not. But what does the Torah say here? Not the Torah. It's the oral Torah. It's the oral. This is the Mishnah, and it says, "Lematza Kadosh Baruch Hu kli machzik bracha Yisrael." It's a very powerful teaching that unity for Torah actually is so powerful. It's one of the most important things, that there's no vessel that can contain blessings for Israel except if we're at peace. And that's why we say this blessing, Hashem oz le'amo yiten, God will give strength to his people. Hashem yivarech es amo b'shalom, God will bless his people with peace. And we say it as a blessing that God will, but it's a prayer, because we know that not always are we in this way. So we wonder, how do we achieve this level of unity that they got at Mount Sinai? It's one thing to camp out at the foot of a mountain in the desert with God making daily appearances and forget about your ego for a bit. That's very nice. But how are we supposed to honestly feel as one with everyone else around us? I know all the things that happen at the conference, but at this little mini conference that we have a bigger conference coming up in July. But at the little conference, one of the rabbis was talking about how to be a better speaker and teacher. So one said, Rabbi Jacobson, before he became the master's teacher, thinker, I know personally because I was a student in the late 90s. And he's 10 years older than us. In fact, his birthday's coming up in a few weeks. Dear mentor and teacher. I was his driver. I was his chauffeur for a couple of weeks. I would drive him to some of his talks. So it was a great privilege. And in the car, the truth is, he was usually focused only on his writing and preparing his talks. And sometimes he would practice it on me. And sometimes he would take a tape recorder out and listen to himself as unpleasant, as uncomfortable, as excruciating as that could be. I hate listening to myself. If I ever wind up on YouTube listening to myself, I delete the videos. I can't do it. But actually, it's one of the best things to do. I remember there was a magician, an illusionist in town. He told me, you don't know how many times I rewatch the videos of how he's done his performances in order to perfect it, in order to get better at it, in order to improve. Why am I mentioning you this? I'm already forgetting. Oh, I was telling you one of the rabbis. So there were different discussions how to improve on your sermons. And the ultimate point was not how to be a good sermon giver, because that's not the point. We're not preachers. The point is we want to teach so we can make a difference in people's lives. That we could all, you could leave a sermon on Shabbos and say, I've improved. I've refined myself. I've become a better Jew, a better parent, a better mother, a better father, a better husband, a better wife, right? So one of the rabbis says he asks his wife every week, and his wife will tell him what he said wrong and how he told the joke wrong and this and that and the other. So another rabbi says he's supposed to ask somebody you like, or somebody who likes you. I forgot. Either way, put jokes aside. My point only mentioning that is sometimes husbands and wives, parents and children, people struggle getting along with each other. So how are we supposed to honestly feel as one with everyone else around us when people get on our nerves? Now, I know we discussed this in the context of the students of Rabbi Akiva a few weeks ago. And there we said there's a difference between loving and liking, where loving comes from our sameness, for what we have in common with each other. And that's why usually the most intense love is with our family, our loved ones, right? But you could love somebody and not respect them, not like them. There could be things that challenge that love. Parents might tell their children, we love you, you're our child. But we don't approve, we don't endorse certain behaviors. We can't respect certain actions. And so let's look in Tanya here, where the Alter Rebbe comes to the rescue, and the Alter Rebbe discusses one of the most fundamental concepts in Hasidic thought, and the idea of Avas Yisrael, how to truly love another. Let's read it. He says as follows: it is possible, as much as our souls are paired one with another, with one parent, thus all Jews are called siblings by virtue of the root of their soul in the one God. It is only the bodies that are distinct. Now you might say, all of humanity, we're all one. It's true. But definitely we come closer as a family. But Alter Rebbe is, I think, laying down a simple but very deeply profound idea. And that is that we have to realize every one of us possesses a fragment, a spark of God inside each of us. That's something we call our soul, okay? And if you study chapter 32, which is I put it on the screen here for you, just a little excerpt of it. If you apply it online, you should have received the book. We were giving out these books called Avas Yisrael, to love each other. If you did not apply, then you can apply still. And you can get it. It's a 180 rand book. You'll get it gratis, for free, just for applying for it. But the idea here in chapter 32, and what is 32 in Hebrew? Lamed Bez, which spells the word lev, which means heart. In English, it would spell love. So you got love in the heart. And he talks there that if you want to achieve true unity, to really love another person like you love yourself, like the Torah tells us to love your fellow as yourself. And we had that discussion a few weeks ago. Remember the discussion? Because Rabbi Akiva said the Torah is the most fundamental principle of the whole Torah. But our debate was, what happens if you have one bottle and who should drink the bottle? You or your friend? You might get stuck. And we said, take care of yourself before you take care of the other. Not that you shouldn't take care of the other. On the contrary, of course you should. But the only way you'll be in a position to help another is if you take care of yourself. That's why on the airplane, they tell you put the oxygen mask first on yourself, only then on your child or neighbor or parent or whoever's sitting next to you. Because you cannot be a proper service to assist the person next to you if you don't take care of yourself. We know it's an important point. So in this chapter 32 of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe says you have to realize that we are all one. The person sitting next to me is as important. Every person is important. The only thing that sets us apart is our body. But your soul doesn't see that distinction, which is why there's such a beautiful, profound teaching. My favorite one in Hayom Yom. I mean, I'll have a lot of favorite ones. But this favorite one is about when two Jews get together, we have two godly souls against one animal soul. What does that mean? How are we two godly souls against one animal soul? Because what happens is your godly soul cares for my godly soul cares for your godly soul. But I got to be honest and frank, my animal soul doesn't care so much for yours. because mine is animalistic. It's narcissistic. It's self-centered and egocentric. And who does it care for? Numero uno, myself. And guess what? You also have an animal soul because you're a human being. And your animal soul cares for you. So they're at odds with each other. Yours cares for you, mine cares for me. But we have two godly souls teaming up with each other, and therefore we can overcome the animalistic tendencies we have. And I think as believing Jews, it is our job on any day to get in touch with our souls, not to pay as much attention to our body. Of course, if you neglect your body, you're actually neglecting your soul. As our sages teach us, that a small hole in the body is a big hole in the soul. But when we are focused on our soul, and that's why we take care of our bodies for our soul to be well, then we actually can take care of each other. And perhaps a practical way of understanding this is imagine an army, okay? A platoon of soldiers embedded deep in a trench, okay? And you got bullets flying in all directions, whizzing over your heads every second, yeah? You can only imagine how deeply the comrades in arms feel for each other. And there are many such stories, incredible stories of brotherhood and self-sacrifice that we've read and heard from soldiers in the battlefield, okay? Oftentimes we know that soldiers in arms, what's the term for that? Where you have soldiers in arms, they have a unique bond that one who wasn't with them will never understand nor experience, okay? And why is that so? Why do fellow soldiers grow so close? What is it about war that dissolves all petty strife and unites the greatest of people, the greatest of men with the simplest of soldiers? What is it? They have a cause, right? When bullets are flying overhead, the body odor of the person next to you is not noticeable. When you're united in the common cause of defeating an enemy, you're focused simply on survival, right? You just want to preserve your life. And therefore, whatever else is going on, all the other petty differences are dissolved. We focus on a common unifying cause and less on the individual differences. And that's something we have to realize, that in our souls, we have to focus more on our souls, less on our bodies. And that's how we get to grow closer. And so I think there's a very important point here about unity or equality. When we focus on our soul and leave the body in the rearview mirror, so to say, body is also important. We can't neglect it. We can't abandon it. But then we realize our equality, and there's really no distinction. So, are we arguing that Judaism advocates for radical equality, where Marxism, socialism, communism, everybody's got to be the same and just some people are more equal than others? We know that doesn't work, right? So what is the Torah's idea of equality? How do we, think of a concert? You go to a concert. We have a great concert coming up soon with Avram Fried. You look at the orchestra. Every instrument is different. And each instrument plays its own unique role. And if you gave everybody the same instrument, it wouldn't work. And the musicians harmonize with each other. That's what makes the beauty of it. So we have to realize that in every aspect of life, there's got to be the harmony, that each person has their unique role that they play. And when we're reading our parsha this week, which is always read before Shavuos, what's the significance of this? There's obviously a very important point that we're leading up to the holiday of receiving the Torah that is emphasizing this idea. And the Torah tells us that when they ventured into the desert and they were getting ready to receive the Torah at Mount Sinai, what did it say we read here before? They all encamped at the mountain. How? Like one person with one heart. And this is a very important requisite, a prerequisite to receiving the Torah. We can achieve our unity when we focus on our souls and less on our bodies, because our souls are really one. So, are we really advocating for absolute equality? Okay. So how do we balance equality and individuality, which are both very important, and our parsha talks about it. In our parsha, you'll notice a lot of differences while we also talk about equality. Yes, it's important. They came to Mount Sinai like one person with one heart. But at the same time, when we look at the parsha and we read the text, the ideas, the passages, the verses, we'll see a very different perspective where we see individuality in a very strong way. Each tribe encamped in its own space. And you had leaders and you had followers and you had judges and you had rulers and you had princes. Hold on. That doesn't seem to advocate equality. Doesn't that show differences? Absolutely. So in order to understand this better, let's go to another story in the Torah. A story from long ago. And when we look at the tribalism in the Torah, we'll also recognize while there has to be equality, we'll also see the differences. So let's start with tribalism. The equality of Sodom. Okay? Here the Medrash tells us, back in Sodom, that when a pauper would enter Sodom and thereafter wish to leave, they would immediately lay him down in a short bed, and the portion of his legs that would extend over the edge of the bed would be cut off. They would amputate it. If the person was short, they would lie him down in a long bed, hold him down, and stretch him out until his body filled the bed. All right? They would do this until the person died, basically. Now, this obviously sounds absurd, doesn't it? People of Sodom demonstrated that equality is not always a good thing. You have short people and tall people, fat people and skinny people, healthy people and sick people, male people, women, everyone, right? Just because somebody's too tall, you have to chop off his legs. Just because they're too short, you have to stretch them out. What is going on here? Why would the Medrash, whether this is exactly the way it was or the Medrash is exaggerating, but the point is, equality could sometimes be dangerous. It could be damaging. It has its drawbacks, okay? Do we all acknowledge and recognize that equality is not always perfect? Yeah. So let's understand this a little bit better. And that brings us back to our parsha. Because there's a dramatic storyline, okay? And while the parsha starts off with the census, and that's why the book is called Numbers, in fact, because it talks about the various numbers, the census of the Jewish people, and it goes into great detail about the numbers. But it also then continues and discusses the formation of the camp, of how they traveled. Let's read it in the verses in our parsha, okay? The parsha says, "Ish al diglei be'oisais leveisavaisim yachad b'nei Yisrael." The children of Israel, the verse says here, they shall encamp, each person by his division, with the flagstaff of their father's house. Some distance from the tent of meeting, they shall encamp. Now, interestingly, for some time, it wasn't just their father's house, it was also their mother's, because people generally tried to marry within their own tribe, but not always was that possible. And so sometimes people married out of their tribe. And in fact, eventually, the rule of marrying within your tribe was abolished. We still only marry within our people, but you don't have to only marry within your tribe. And the verse continues, "Those camping in front to the east were the legions under the division of the camp of Yehuda." And it goes on to describe who is the leader of the camp of Yehuda at the very beginning of the parsha. Nachshon ben Aminadab. And it goes on, the legions under the division of the camp of Reuven were to the south. Who was the leader? Elitzur ben Shteir. And it goes on, and you had the different camps, and we read the verses here that describe each camp until we got to 603,550 people. You can read the verses, but I don't want to spend time on that. In short, we had 4 main camps, and each of those camps was further subdivided into the tribes, and they were all camped around the Mishkan. And I bet within each camp, each family had their own space too. Bilam, in fact, when he wanted to curse the Jewish people, what did he notice? The modesty with the way in which they encamped, that nobody's tent opening faced the other person's, meaning each family had their privacy. And each camp, actually, as you can see in this AI image here, each camp bore its own flag. Each tribe had their own symbols. So you could see right here on the Aron Kodesh, on the Ark, the symbolism, the flag of each tribe. So what we see here is that certainly, while there has to be equality, while it's important for us to be united, we also realize and celebrate our differences. Maintaining tribal identity wasn't just superimposed on the people. There's a fascinating medrash here that describes it. Oh, here we go, in more detail, but I'm going to move here. Describing, and you can see here just a diagram about how they encamped. But let's look at it here in the Medrash in another, in better wording. It's a very interesting Medrash. So what does the Medrash say? When God appeared to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai, 22,000 angels accompanied him, all under the banner of different flags. When the Jews saw that they were grouped under different flags, they were roused with a desire for flags as well, stating, "We wish we could make flags like that." God exclaimed, "You want flags? But by my life, your request will be fulfilled." Immediately God informed the Jewish people of the command and told Moses to instruct the Jewish people to make flags as they wished. So what was it, my friends? What was it about the flags of the angels on high that impressed the Jewish people so much? And so we have another commentary here. Rabbi Clemens Kalman Epstein, in his book, Ma'or Vashemesh, he explains as follows. The Jews saw the angels under their flags, namely that no angel intruded into their colleague's lane. They stayed in their lane. Michael doesn't intrude into Gabriel's lane. Rather, every angel stays in their lane and perceives godliness accordingly. The Jews wished for the same thing, stating, if only we would do the same thing, if only no one would push another to try to reach past the appropriate level for them. Think about it like this. God said to Moses, do it for them. In other words, in as much as they wanted flags, namely, that no one intrude into the next person's lane, rather every person should receive what's appropriate to their level of readiness, do it. The Levites will be in one group. We know the Levites had their job, their task in the tabernacle, right? And each tribe had their task, their purpose. So the whole point that's being emphasized here is that the angels are different from each other, as Rabbi Clemens Kalman's explaining. Each angel, in fact, angels are described as unidimensional. An angel could have only one task. The angel for healing is specifically tasked with that job. That's their job. So no angel is ever tasked with more than one mission. And the reason for this is because the angels are one-dimensional. They are limited to a particular style, and they cannot carry out multiple missions. That's not their thing. They do what they're told to do. So when the Jewish people saw that the angels accompanying God with such clarity of their distinct identities, they wanted the same thing. They wanted a system that would break up the one big blob that they were that everybody's the same. And this is actually something that's to be celebrated. Individuality is not limited to tribalism. It extends to each individual. When we count the Omer, we count each and every single day. We make every day count. It's important to recognize that every person has their own specific identity. Each person is indispensable. What happened to my text here? Didn't work out nicely. Let's look at this verse. King Solomon says this: Chanoch lanar al pi darko. Train a child according to his way, even when he grows old, lo yasim imano, he will not turn away from it. So I think this verse itself is so telling. Shlomo HaMelech is not advocating for a parent to take their little kid, the one who's artistic, and make them do, something else. Each person has their thing. And while everybody needs bread, for a person who's a skilled scientist to spend their time baking bread is wasting their talent. Do you all agree? And that applies to all of us. Yes, everybody needs bread to eat. But King Solomon is telling us something very, very important here about education that I think we could all learn. Let's look at this. This is something we actually just read in Pirkei Avos this past Shabbos. And it says as follows, Arba midas betalmidim. There are 4 types of disciples. Ready to read it? Mar lishmar mar. Those are quick to comprehend and quick to forget. And of course, their gain disappears in the loss. They're slow to comprehend and slow to forget. Again, their loss disappears in their gain. The ideal is quick to comprehend and slow to forget. If that would make us wise. At the same time, we have another text here. And this is the Alter Rebbe, where he tells us in his introduction to Tanya something very important about diversity among people. And let's read it because I think it's important for us to appreciate. He says, even in the case of the laws governing things prohibited and permitted, which have been revealed to us and to our children, we find differences among the various sages, the Tanaim and Amoraim. Why do we have different names for the sages? Because they were different generations and different, more closely connected to the receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai, etc. And therefore, you have to understand, we also have different attributes. Those are more kindness-oriented and more disciplinary. So there's different souls that come from different sources. And we all have our own unique individuality. So the whole point is that diversity and individuality is something that is the way we were programmed, the way God created us. Let's stop thinking that everybody has to be the same. The Kotzker Rebbe is the one who said this powerful line that I showed you the song last week. I think I did. Or did I forget to? No, I didn't. Okay, I got to show you a beautiful Avram Fried song for this. But it's a line where he says, if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, then I am I and you are you. But if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am I, then I'm not I and you're not you. You get it? I've done this one with you before. What was the whole point? What was the Kotzker Rebbe saying? And you think about this. Which one is it? Are we meant to all be the same? Do I have to do everything to impress you and you have to do everything to impress me? Even in a marriage, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. Each person has to have their own identity. So Judaism espouses both because we have to have that balance. So again, how do you reconcile this between unity and individuality? Right? How do we reconcile the desire to recognize everyone as inherently equal, but at the same time realize that we all have our differences? Okay? That's the question. And that's something we have to look at, how we could fix that and appreciate it. So let's use a few more minutes that we got. The reality is that the desire to recognize everyone as unique and the value that all are created equal are not only not contradictory, I would say they complement each other. And let's learn it again back in the teachings of the Alter Rebbe here in his book called Likutei Torah. And he talks here how we are all, every Jew is part of one large body. For every Jew possesses a certain quality that no one else does. And together we're all complement each other. It turns out that everyone possesses a certain quality that places them at an advantage over the next person. And in that respect, the next person needs them. Right? We all complement each other. And he says, take the human body, for example. When its respective parts, the head all the way to the feet. Yes, the feet are the lowest part and the head is far superior. Yet in certain respects, the feet have the distinction that the head needs them to go anywhere. What's more, the feet literally uphold the entire body, including the head. It turns out that the head is incomplete without the feet. And the same is with the body of the Jewish people. And we have to remember this point, that it turns out that even for the person who thinks they are ahead relative to the counterpart, right? I'm better. No, nobody's better. Each person has a distinct role. And that's the point here, that this is a tremendous idea, that the reality is that this isn't a conflict. This is the way God created us. And the only way we could truly be united with each other is by recognizing our differences too. Of course, we're all unique. Of course, we're all indispensable to God's plan. We all have our own individual talents, our own tendencies, our own, whatever you want to say. Every person has got their own unique personality. And we got to be true to ourselves because everyone else is taken. But it's also true that we're all created equal because we all need each other in order for it to work. The poor needs the rich and the rich needs the poor. Right? People need doctors and doctors need lawyers and lawyers need accountants and everybody needs each other. So you go back to the military. Is the general equal to the cadet? No. Well, first blush, maybe they are there. Well, they're equal in one sense and different in another. Each one has their role to play. And when you think about it this way, I think we start to understand that while the general might have a higher position than the cadet, but what's a general without his soldiers, right? The general very much needs the soldiers. Without the cadet fighting on the field, the general is useless. So when they both think about that, that's when they can achieve unity. Because their uniqueness is precisely what makes them complement each other, and that's what creates togetherness. And by contrast, if everyone does the same thing and everyone has the same qualities, then it's all just one big game of copy and paste. If we expect each of our kids to be the same as the other, we're making a big mistake. And that's why the Torah this week talks about On the one hand, you're coming to Mount Sinai to receive the Torah. And they had to all be there like one person with one heart. But at the same time, we have to realize that there were many differences, that we recognize the commonality between us, but we also recognize our unique elements and aspects within each other. Here is a very beautiful expression from the previous Rebbe. It's in Yiddish. I'm just going to make it very short. But he says, when souls descend from high to integrate into a physical body, it has a particular mission, and we must be careful not to end up as one of the wandering souls. And he tells a story to illustrate the concept of a wandering soul of a wealthy person and his wagon driver. Back in the day, a pious, wealthy merchants would only travel on business during certain seasons, using the rest of the time to study Torah. It happened once that a certain wealthy man arrived with his wagon driver to his city Friday afternoon before Shabbos. The wealthy man went to the mikveh, to the ritual bath in honor of Shabbos. He dressed in his Shabbos finery and made his way to the synagogue. Continuing the story, on the way he saw a large wagon stuck in the mud on the road. Aware of the mitzvah to aid a stranded traveler, he went to go and help the hapless wagon driver. Not used to such a heavy labor, he got completely filthy and worn out. Imagine he's there in his tuxedo and his kapata and his beautiful clothing, and there he's trying to schlep the guy out of the mud. But he's not cut out for it. It's not the kind of thing he does. Eventually, he hobbled to the shul to pray, filthy and hurt. The wagon driver also went to shul after washing up and getting ready for Shabbos. Arriving early, he passed the time for reciting psalms. He met a few other poor travelers, invited them over to his Shabbos meal. After all, he was accompanying a rich guy. And he has a whole group of poor people coming with him. After davening, what happens when the gabbai, where'd that go? After davening, when the gabbai of the shul wished to split up the guests between the various members of the community, all the travelers explained they already had where to go. They're going to the wagon driver. So what happened after the prayers, the wealthy man went home to his host, maimed and bruised, while the wagon driver took 10 guests to his home. The wealthy man fulfilled the mitzvah of aiding travelers, while the wagon driver fulfilled the mitzvah of inviting guests. After 120 years, when both protagonists arrived at the heavenly court, it was ruled that the wagon driver must return to this world to fulfill the mitzvah of aiding travelers, and the wealthy man would have to return to fulfill the mitzvah of inviting guests. Everyone has their unique mission. We must know what the mission is so as not to mistakenly switch with someone else's. But from the perspective of God, who assigns each mission, they're all the same. And I think it's a very important point. And the story teaches us a very important lesson. Every person has their own unique mission according to the qualities of our soul. And to mistake one person's mission with another person's, I think, is a crime. Because, for the doctor to be the baker, it's wrong. A doctor should be able to have an accountant to take care of his taxes or her taxes, so the doctor can focus on healing patients. And this is the point that the previous Rebbe was making here, is that there's both qualities. There's uniqueness and there's individuality. And they have to give way for each other for where we're all equal. And that creates unity. And that's important. And that's what happened at Mount Sinai. From one angle, the Jews stood at Mount Sinai and achieved a complete sense of unity. Every person had to be present, and each person was receiving the Torah anew, like a newborn baby, so to say, ready to receive the word from God. And that's why the Rebbe emphasized that men, women, children, youngsters, seniors, everybody should be at shul on Shavuos to re-experience that event of receiving the Torah. Because everyone, from the youngest to the eldest, has to hear the Ten Commandments and remember and relive that event in the best way. Let's see it in the Rebbe's own words, because the way he puts it here. He says that all children from the age of 1 month, even tiny infants, should accompany their parents to hear the Torah being read, particularly the Ten Commandments and Shavuos. They should do so in a holy place with the congregation of many tens of people with a blessing prior and following the reading. This replicates the scene of the giving the Torah at Mount Sinai. Very, very important. And yet at the same time, every Jew heard the Ten Commandments in a singular form, as if God spoke to them personally and said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am your God. That, again, speaking in the singular. Grammatically, if you're talking to a lot of people, it should have said, Ani Hashem Elokecha, I'm the Lord your God in the plural. but God spoke to us individually. And he explains this. Nachmanides says, all the commandments were stated in the singular language to give warning that every individual is personally responsible for the mitzvahs and would be punished accordingly. No one should think that punishment will only be meted out communally when the majority sins, and that the individual will get away with their sin. Nachmanides frames the individuality in a sense that looks a little bit negative, but the point I'm saying is he's talking about we each have a responsibility to one another. We each have a responsibility to the Torah. And the point is, don't blame others. We each have to take that responsibility upon ourselves. The individual connection to the Torah is so important that every single person counts. Not to think that don't pass the buck on to somebody else. And I think it's an important message to every one of us. So do we need to give everyone equal opportunity? Are we supposed to give the same amount of attention to all of our children, students, and friends? Why not? Somebody spoke at the conference talking about, of course, if God forbid a parent had a child who's unwell, would they not be giving a lot more, disproportionately more attention to that child, because that child needs it, right? And the same thing to realize when we start, painting everybody with the same brush, that we're all equal. Yes, in some respects, we are all equal. We're all created equally by Hashem. We're all equally created in the divine image, but we're also equally different, okay? So there's no point of giving everybody the same opportunity because everybody's different. Don't take somebody who would make a great surgeon and turn them into a butcher, because that's not what they were made out to be. And I think this applies to all areas of life. Not everybody is destined to achieve the same thing or to fulfill identical missions. One person is going to be wealthy and unfortunately another person is not. And for the person who's not, it would be foolish and painful for them to sit constantly pushing themselves to try to make a lot of money because, maybe they should try. I'm not saying they shouldn't. But my point is, if that's not their forte, maybe they're better at studying. Maybe they're more academically inclined. And for whatever reason in today's society, academics aren't the ones who are getting paid the big bucks like the entrepreneurs. And maybe they're not cut out for that. And my point is not to tell people not to follow their dreams. My point is that if everybody recognizes their unique mission and their purpose and the contribution that they can make to society, that our own God-given talents and uniqueness that each one of us is indispensable for, then we can unite together because every person has a role to play. And we look at the beautiful symphony that's made of all the different instruments. And we have the piano, and we have the trumpet, and we have the clarinet, and we have the drums and the flutes. True harmony is only achieved if each instrument plays its part with its own unique voice. And otherwise, what are we going to have? So my friends, let's remember this. This is the message, this is the point, that in the other places they had strife, but maybe we could look at the diversity that blends everybody together. So, sorry, I got some other points here, but I see I'm given the message, time to wrap it up, and they need me upstairs for the meeting. So I hope this idea that we discussed today will help us in realizing indeed we are all created equal, and we're all equally indispensable in God's eyes. And everybody's equal, right? But we also possess unique talents that no one else has. Okay? And were everybody the same, I think we would miss the point. Maybe another person would be repeating the same thing, the same purpose I have, and that's not the idea. Every soul has its own unique mission, and therefore each one of us complements the other. And thank you all for your engagement, your involvement, and we'll continue next week, please God, with more lessons relating to Shavuos to prepare for receiving the Torah once again at Mount Sinai. Yes.
That makes me then proceed